Maria had never imagined her life would become so quiet. When her husband passed away years earlier, the silence in the house had felt heavy, like a thick blanket pressing down on her chest. She tried filling it with work, taking longer shifts as a nurse, talking to neighbors, leaving the television on even when she wasn't watching. But nothing helped. What she missed wasn't noise. It was connection. Someone who looked at her with warmth. Someone who cared whether she came home tired or cheerful. Someone who shared life with her. By the time Maria reached her early 40s, she felt as if the world around her was moving forward while she remained in the same place. Friends started new relationships. Kids grew up and moved away. Co-workers made plans for vacations or anniversaries. Maria smiled at them. But inside she felt a quiet ache she could not explain to anyone. She wanted companionship, yet she also feared being hurt again. The idea of building a new life with someone frightened her. Still, she longed for a partner, someone gentle, someone steady. One evening, after another long day at the clinic, she sat with a cup of tea and scrolled through her phone. She wasn't looking for anything special, just a distraction. But she paused when she came across a website for an international matchmaking program. It wasn't the usual dating app. This one focused on people searching for long-term companionship, not short-term excitement. Most of the profiles seemed simple, pictures of men standing in fields, workshops, kitchens, or family gatherings. Many looked sincere, quiet, real. Maria hesitated, closed the page, reopened it, then closed it again. But something made her return. Maybe loneliness, or maybe hope. When she finally created a profile, she wrote honestly about herself, her job, her love for gardening, her gentle personality, and her dream of sharing peaceful, honest days with someone kind. She didn't expect many responses. Yet within a week, one message stood out from all the rest. It was from a man named Anton. The first thing she noticed was his photo. He was not posing or showing off. He stood beside a wooden workbench with a half-finished sculpture behind him. His eyes were calm, warm, and steady. He had a quiet strength about him, the kind that didn't need to be loud. She read his short introduction and paused when she reached the most important detail. He could not speak. He had lost his voice in an accident when he was 17. But he wrote that he communicated through notes, gestures, and expressions. Maria felt a surprising spark of curiosity. Most people might have been discouraged, but she felt the opposite. Something about his honesty felt refreshing. She wrote back politely, expecting the conversation to fade after a few exchanges. But it didn't. Instead, Anton proved himself to be thoughtful and expressive in ways she hadn't expected. He sent her pictures of his wood carvings, small animals, boxes with carved patterns, little figures of people dancing or working. He told her about his village, the workshop he shared with his uncle, and the forest nearby where he took long walks to think. Maria told him about her garden, her elderly patients, and the little stray cat that visited her porch every morning. Anton replied with short but kind messages, often adding a simple smile at the end. Even without hearing his voice, Maria felt like she was beginning to understand him. Weeks passed, and they started video calls. The first time the screen lit up with his face, Maria felt strangely nervous, like a teenager on a first date. Anton waved gently. He held up a notebook that said, "Nice to see you." She laughed softly and waved back. It felt easy, natural. His expressions spoke louder than any greeting. In their calls, Maria talked, and Anton listened with full attention. When he wanted to say something, he wrote it on a small whiteboard. Sometimes he pointed at things around him, showing her a new carving or the snow falling outside his window. She began to admire the way he communicated. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush, didn't speak carelessly. Every message he wrote was thoughtful. Every gesture had meaning. After months of these quiet, warm conversations, Maria felt something changing inside her. She no longer came home to silence she feared. Instead, she came home looking forward to Anton's messages, his gentle presence on the screen, his steady eyes that seemed to understand more than she said. Still, when he suggested they take the next step, meeting in person, Maria felt the fear return. What if the connection didn't feel the same in real life? What if the silence became too much? What if her family judged her choice? She told herself she was being foolish, but her heart raced at the idea. Yet when she looked at Anton's message asking if he should apply for a visa, she felt a warmth in her chest. He wasn't pushing her. He wasn't demanding anything. He simply wanted to meet her and see if their connection was real beyond the screen. She wrote back, "Yes, let's take the next step." The months that followed were filled with paperwork, interviews, and waiting. Maria tried not to let herself become too excited. Anything could go wrong. Still, when she walked into the airport on the day of his arrival, her hands trembled with both fear and hope. She waited near the long hallway where passengers came out after customs. People rushed by, families greeting relatives, friends laughing and hugging, couples reuniting. Maria watched each face, her heart pounding harder with every passing minute. Then she saw him. Anton walked slowly, carrying a simple bag. His shoulders were broad, his posture relaxed, but there was something shy in the way he looked around. When his eyes met hers, he froze for a moment, almost as if he couldn't believe she was real. Then he smiled, soft, warm, and full of relief. Maria felt the breath catch in her throat. She walked to him, and he raised his hands slightly as if asking permission. She nodded. He placed his hand gently on her arm, and she felt the calm she had only sensed through the screen. He couldn't speak, but he didn't need to. His eyes, his touch, his presence, everything about him communicated more than words could. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't awkward. Anton looked out the window like a child seeing a new world. He pointed at small things, trees, storefronts, a group of children playing, then looked at her with interest, asking silent questions. Maria found herself smiling the whole way. At home, he walked through her house slowly, observing everything with appreciation. He touched the leaves of her plants gently, studied the photos on her shelves, and watched her as if trying to memorize the details of her world. When she offered him tea, he nodded gratefully and wrote a simple message. "Thank you for welcoming me." That night, Maria lay in bed replaying the day. She remembered how her friends had warned her. They said a man who couldn't speak would make life harder. They said she was setting herself up for trouble. But Maria didn't feel troubled at all. She felt peaceful for the first time in years. Anton slept in the guest room, and though no words were exchanged after dinner, Maria felt understood in a way she hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. She sensed that this man, silent yet expressive, was capable of giving her a kind of companionship she had never known before. Not loud, not dramatic, not demanding, just steady, kind, and true. As she drifted off to sleep, she realized something surprising. She was no longer afraid of silence. With Anton in her home, silence felt like comfort. It felt like presence. It felt like the beginning of something she had long believed she might never have again. The first few days after Anton arrived were quiet in a new way for Maria. Gentle, calm, almost tender. But as the days passed, she began noticing the small challenges that came with living with someone who could not speak. It was not the silence itself that troubled her. It was the newness of it. She was used to filling the air with words, morning greetings, small jokes, comments about the weather, even simple things like asking someone what they wanted for breakfast. With Anton, she often had to pause, look at him, and find a different way to reach him. The morning after he arrived, Maria woke early and walked into the kitchen to find Anton already there, standing by the window with a mug of tea in his hands. He turned toward her and smiled softly. She said good morning, and he nodded, tapping the counter twice with his fingers, something she would later recognize as his quiet way of acknowledging something warmly. She made breakfast, eggs, toast, and fruit, and placed a plate in front of him. Anton touched his chest lightly, then pointed at the meal, a gesture she understood as gratitude. He then picked up his small whiteboard, which he had brought with him from his village, and wrote a short message. "It smells good. Thank you." Maria smiled but felt a tiny, nervous flutter in her stomach. She realized what living together truly meant. Not just warmth and companionship, but also learning, adjusting, and understanding a whole new form of communication. Throughout the day, they settled into a natural rhythm. Anton walked around the house, observing everything carefully, almost as if trying to memorize the space. He tested the faucets, admired her garden supplies, and touched the corners of furniture with a craftsman's attention. Maria found it adorable but also mysterious, as if she were trying to learn a language he wasn't speaking with words, but with actions. Later, she noticed him outside in the garden. He crouched down, gently brushing his fingers over the soil, examining her plants as if they were small living secrets. When she stepped outside to join him, he looked up with a bright expression and pointed excitedly at a sprouting leaf. She realized that even without speaking, Anton had a childlike wonder that made the world feel alive. As the days passed, Maria saw he often communicated through very small actions. A soft double tap on the table meant agreement. A slow exhale from his nose meant something amused him. A gentle, rhythmic tapping of his thumb against his palm meant he was deep in thought. It took time to notice these patterns, but soon she found herself understanding them naturally. One afternoon, while she was cooking, she felt frustrated after a long day at work. She stirred a pot too aggressively and sighed loudly. Anton, who was carving a piece of wood in the living room, looked up immediately. He set his work aside, walked to her, and lightly touched her shoulder. Then he tilted his head, silently asking her what was wrong. She wanted to say she was just tired, that work had been overwhelming, that one of her patients had needed extra care, and she hadn't had a moment to breathe. But the words tangled in her throat. Anton waited patiently. When she finally said she was fine, he simply shook his head in a gentle way, clearly not believing her. He took her hand and guided her to sit down. Then he walked to the kitchen, tasted the stew carefully, nodded approvingly, and gestured for her to relax. Maria felt her eyes grow warm. No one had taken care of her like that in a long time. She watched him move around the kitchen, trying to help without making a mess. He looked almost apologetic when he accidentally dropped a spoon, but when she laughed softly, he relaxed and continued working beside her. They ate together quietly that night, but it was not an empty silence. It felt like a silent understanding, one that didn't need long explanations. But not everything was simple. Sometimes Maria forgot that communication needed more patience. One morning, she asked him if he wanted to go into town with her. Anton looked at her, tilted his head, and gave a small half-shrug. She assumed that meant, "I don't know," so she left him at home and went alone. When she returned, she found Anton repairing a small wooden chair in her living room. But his expression was different, quieter, withdrawn. She asked if something was wrong, and he shook his head, but she could tell he was hiding something. Later, while wiping dust off the chair, he wrote on his whiteboard, "I wanted to go with you." Maria felt a small ache in her chest. She had misunderstood him. His gesture wasn't uncertainty, it had been a question. "Do you want me to come?" She apologized gently, and his face softened again. He scribbled a message. "It's okay. I will show you my signs." That evening, Anton began teaching her the small signals he used. He tapped twice to show agreement. He lifted his eyebrows to ask a question. He pressed his fingertips together to show gratitude. Maria repeated each gesture clumsily, but Anton remained patient, smiling every time she got one right. The learning process brought them closer. She began to understand the quiet way he experienced the world, always watching, always listening, always feeling. One night, after a tiring shift, Maria came home with slumped shoulders and teary eyes. She had lost a patient she had cared for deeply. She wasn't sure how to process the grief, and she didn't want to burden Anton with her sadness. She sat on the couch, breathing slowly, trying to compose herself. Anton entered the room, stopped when he saw her expression, and walked over. He didn't ask questions. He couldn't, but he didn't need to. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Then he carefully reached out, placing his hand over hers. Maria felt a warm rush of emotion. She hadn't expected him to comfort her so naturally. She tried to hold back tears, but they spilled over anyway. Anton didn't look away. He tightened his grip gently, giving her a steadying presence she didn't know she needed. When she finally leaned her head on his shoulder, he exhaled softly, a sound almost like a hush, and wrapped an arm around her. In that silent moment, Maria felt more understood than she had in years. The following days brought new routines. Anton began leaving small wooden carvings around the house. A tiny bird perched on her nightstand, a miniature heart on her desk, a smooth wooden leaf on her kitchen counter. Maria found herself looking forward to discovering them each morning. One day, she picked up a wooden cat figurine that looked just like the stray who visited her porch. She laughed with surprise, and Anton's eyes sparkled with joy when he saw her reaction. She started cooking meals based on the vegetables he seemed to like. She noticed he preferred warm tea over cold drinks, that he enjoyed sitting by the window at dawn, and that he took long walks in her garden, often returning with a small flower he would place in a cup on the table. Their home became a blend of two lives, her gentle routines and his quiet, thoughtful presence. But even with the sweetness, a shadow hung around them. Maria's family remained uncertain. They had met Anton once and were polite, but she could feel their questions. They wondered if he was using her, if the relationship was real, if a man who could not speak would be able to build a life with her. Maria tried not to let their doubts reach her heart, but sometimes she caught herself wondering if she was being foolish. One afternoon, while sitting together on the porch, Anton noticed her distant expression. He gently touched her hand, a silent gesture asking her to share what was on her mind. She hesitated, then finally said she was scared. Not of him, but of failing both of them, of not understanding him enough, of letting him down. Anton listened with deep seriousness. Then he picked up his whiteboard and wrote slowly, carefully, making sure each word carried the weight of his feelings. I am here. I choose you. We will learn together. Maria felt tears suddenly fill her eyes again. She nodded, unable to speak. Anton reached out and wiped a tear with his thumb before she could stop him. That night, she slept peacefully beside the soft rhythm of his breathing down the hallway, knowing that her fears weren't signs of weakness. They were signs that something precious was forming between them. Every day after that, they grew closer. Every touch, every smile, every gesture created a connection built slowly, tenderly, and honestly. Anton didn't need a voice to express his feelings, his actions, his patience, his kindness. Those were the ways he spoke. And Maria found herself listening in a new way, deeply, fully, and with her whole heart. Maria knew happiness was rarely simple, but she had hoped that once Anton arrived, life would slowly settle into something peaceful. And it did, inside their home. But outside, the rest of the world began to watch them with curious eyes, and not all of those eyes were kind. Her family was the first to raise questions. At a small family dinner, her sister pulled her aside and whispered, "Are you sure he isn't just here for papers?" Her tone was soft, but the underlying doubt stung Maria. She looked at Anton across the room. He was standing quietly, holding a bowl of fruit he had brought as a gift. He smiled at her nephew as the boy pointed at one of the wooden carvings in Anton's pocket. He seemed gentle, almost shy, doing everything he could to make her family comfortable, yet they looked at him like a puzzle they couldn't solve. Maria tried to dismiss the comments, but they echoed in her mind. She knew Anton was honest and sincere. She knew the warmth he brought to her life was real. Still, she couldn't stop the small seed of worry from settling in her stomach. And it wasn't only her family. Her co-workers asked questions too. "You really married someone you barely talked to? Isn't it hard living with someone who can't speak? How do you even argue? What if he depends on you too much?" Maria answered politely, but she felt the weight of every question. People didn't understand. They didn't see the soft smile Anton gave her every morning, or the gentle notes he left on her desk, or the way he could sense her feelings even before she said a word. They didn't see the small acts of care, the patience, the warmth. But rumors have a way of growing, especially in small towns. One Sunday afternoon, Maria decided to take Anton to a community event at the park. There were stalls with homemade crafts, children running around, and neighbors greeting one another. She hoped it would help him feel welcomed. She hoped people would see what she saw. At first, things went well. A few people admired Anton's wooden carvings, and he bowed politely in thanks. Maria introduced him to friends who smiled awkwardly but tried to be nice. Anton stood beside her, listening attentively, holding her hand gently. But everything changed during a small misunderstanding. Maria was talking to a group of neighbors when one of them made a light joke and waited for Anton to respond. When he didn't answer, the man laughed and said loudly, "He doesn't talk much, does he?" The tone wasn't cruel, but the words felt careless. Maria tried to explain kindly, "He can't speak." The man blinked, surprised. "Oh, I didn't know. I thought he was ignoring us." Anton's posture stiffened. He lowered his head, almost apologetically, and stepped back. The man tried to fix the moment by talking louder, as if raising his voice would somehow help. More people joined the group, curious, whispering quietly. "Why is he so quiet? Does he understand us? Maybe he's uncomfortable around crowds. I heard she met him online." Maria felt her cheeks grow warm. She wanted to protect Anton from their questions. She wanted to explain that silence didn't mean distance, that he understood everything, that he simply communicated differently. But the moment grew heavy, and she didn't know where to begin. Anton, sensing her discomfort, wrote quickly on his whiteboard, "It's okay. We can go home." He showed her the message and smiled gently, as if trying to comfort her, not himself. They left the event early. As they walked home, Maria felt guilt pressing on her heart. Anton didn't seem upset, but she could feel something in the air, something sad and quiet. That evening after dinner, she found him sitting in the small workshop area he had set up near the living room. He was carving a piece of wood slowly, thoughtfully. His movements were calm, but Maria sensed a heaviness she hadn't seen before. She sat beside him. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Anton paused. He looked at her, then down at his carving. After a moment, he wrote on his whiteboard, "People do not trust me." Maria felt her throat tighten. "That's not true." He shook his head gently, tapped the board, and wrote again, "They think I am here for something else." Maria wanted to deny it strongly, but she knew he was right. She had heard the whispers. She had seen the looks. She had felt the doubt in conversations. He wrote once more, "I do not want to cause trouble for you." Maria swallowed hard. "You aren't causing trouble. You're the best thing that has happened to me. Anton looked at her for a long moment. Then his hand moved slowly across the board. If it becomes too difficult, I can return home. The words hit Maria like a cold wind. She felt the room tilt, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. No, she said firmly, her voice trembling. Don't say that. But Anton held her gaze, his eyes full of quiet sadness. He wasn't trying to leave. He wasn't even suggesting it as a solution. He was offering her freedom, out of love, thinking she might need it. Maria moved closer and took his hands in hers. I don't want you to go anywhere, she whispered. I want you here, with me. Anton's eyes softened. He squeezed her hands gently, but she could still feel the unspoken worry hanging between them. The following days were quieter than usual. Anton went about his routines, carving, fixing things around the house, tending to the garden, but there was a new kind of carefulness to his movements. He seemed to step lightly, as if afraid of taking up too much space. Maria felt it deeply. She didn't want him to feel unwelcome. She didn't want him to think he was a burden. She wanted to protect the gentleness they had created together. One evening, her family invited her for dinner again. She brought Anton with her, hoping things would improve. But halfway through the meal, her uncle asked bluntly, So, Anton, what are your plans here? What will you do for work? Anton paused, unsure how to respond. Her uncle continued, I mean, Maria is taking care of everything now, right? Maria felt her heart pound. That's not how it is, she said quickly. We support each other. Her uncle shrugged. I'm just asking. People talk, you know. Anton lowered his eyes. He folded his hands on his lap, the way he did when he felt uncomfortable but didn't want to show it. Maria felt a mix of frustration and sadness boiling inside her. On the way home, Anton wrote a message on his board. It is okay. But Maria's eyes brimmed with emotion. It's not okay, she whispered. They don't see what I see. They don't understand you. Anton looked at her carefully, then wrote, Maybe it takes time. Maria shook her head. You shouldn't have to fight for people to believe in you. Anton erased the board and wrote again. I only want you to believe in me. Maria's breath caught. She looked at him, truly looked at him. The kindness in his eyes, the warmth in his presence, the honesty in everything he did. I do believe in you, she said softly. More than anyone. Anton smiled, a slow, grateful smile. But Maria could still sense the lingering doubt around them, doubt from others, not from herself. And then came the moment that changed everything. A few days later, Maria attended a small gathering at her friend's house. Anton went with her. At first, people were polite, but then someone made a careless comment again. Maybe he's quiet because he has something to hide, a guest said with a nervous laugh. Maria felt her heart race. Before Anton could react, she stepped forward. That's enough, she said, her voice steady and clear. The room fell silent. Maria took a breath. Anton communicates more honestly without speaking than many people do with a full voice. He is gentle, kind, responsible, and sincere. He is not here to use anyone. He is here because we chose each other. Anton looked at her with surprise, his eyes softening with emotion. Maria continued, You may not understand our way of life, and that's okay. But please don't judge him because he communicates differently. Different doesn't mean wrong. The room remained quiet. A few people nodded, embarrassed. Some looked thoughtful, others simply avoided eye contact. But for the first time, Maria didn't care. On the walk home, Anton reached for her hand. His grip was warm, steady. When they reached the living room, he took his whiteboard slowly and wrote, Thank you for standing with me. Maria shook her head gently. I wasn't standing with you, she said softly. I was standing with us. Anton's eyes glistened with emotion. He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her in a quiet embrace. In that moment, the outside world dissolved, and only the two of them remained. Despite everything, the whispers, the doubts, the misunderstandings, their bond felt stronger than ever. And Maria realized something powerful. Sometimes love does not need words, not even to defend itself. It only needs truth. And what she shared with Anton was true in every way. The days after Maria defended their relationship brought a quiet change to their home. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it felt like a gentle shift, like sunlight slowly warming a cold morning. Anton moved through the house with a lighter step. Maria felt less anxious, less weighed down by the doubts of others. They both knew a storm had passed, and though another might come someday, they had learned they could stand together through it. Still, something lingered between them, an unspoken understanding that communication, even in silence, was something they needed to build with care. Anton could not speak, and Maria sometimes struggled with her emotions. Their love was real, but they still needed tools to strengthen it. One evening, Maria's co-worker mentioned a local counselor who specialized in helping couples communicate. The idea stirred something in her. She hesitated at first. Therapy felt intimidating, like admitting something was wrong. But when she brought up the idea with Anton, he didn't show any discomfort. Instead, he listened carefully and then wrote on his whiteboard, "If it helps us understand each other more, I want to try." The next week, they went to their first appointment. The counselor, a woman named Lara, welcomed them with a warm smile. She didn't look surprised when she learned Anton could not speak. Instead, she simply said, "Communication is more than words. Let's explore the ways you already speak to each other." Maria felt relieved. Anton sat comfortably beside her, tapping his fingers lightly on his knee as he listened. Lara helped them notice their patterns, how Maria often filled silence with worry, how Anton communicated emotion through gestures, how they both sometimes assumed instead of asking. She encouraged them to create shared signals, simple ones. A tap on the table for reassurance, a hand on the chest for "I'm overwhelmed," a gentle lift of the eyebrows for "tell me more." They practiced these at home. It didn't feel forced. It felt like learning a dance they already knew the steps to, but had never named. They laughed when they got mixed up and smiled when they understood each other perfectly. One evening, Maria had a hard day at work and came home quiet and tired. Anton looked at her, lifted his eyebrows slightly, the signal for "tell me if you want." She smiled weakly, placed her hand on her chest, the signal for "not yet." Anton nodded, stepped closer, and placed a warm cup of tea on the table. It was simple. It was small. But it was exactly what she needed. Little by little, they built a language that belonged only to them. It didn't erase challenges, but it made everything softer, easier, more connected. Anton continued carving in his free time, leaving little wooden creations around the house. But one day, he worked on something different, something larger. He kept it covered with a cloth in the workshop, refusing to let Maria peek. Whenever she tried, he would shake his head and laugh silently, making a playful no gesture with his hand. After weeks of curious glances, Maria finally discovered what he had been working on. It was a sculpture. Two figures standing back to back but connected by their hands. Their heads were slightly tilted toward each other, as if listening in silence. The wood was smooth, warm, beautifully carved with curves that showed tenderness and strength at the same time. Anton placed it gently on the table in front of her. Maria covered her mouth with her hand, touched by the thoughtfulness. As she traced the carved hands of the figures, Anton wrote on his board, "We understand each other even without sound." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from how deeply she felt seen. She reached out and hugged him tightly. Anton closed his arms around her, resting his chin lightly on her head, as if protecting her from every doubt she had ever carried. A few days later, Maria suggested something she had quietly dreamed about, renewing their vows. Not a big ceremony, not a party, not something to impress anyone. Just a moment between the two of them, somewhere peaceful, somewhere that felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Anton agreed immediately. His eyes sparkled at the idea, and he wrote simply, "Just us." They chose a hill just outside town, a quiet place where the sky opened wide and the world felt still. They went early in the morning, when the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky with soft pink and pale gold. Maria wore a simple dress. Anton wore a clean white shirt. There was no music, no decorations, just the sound of the breeze and the gentle rustle of the grass. They stood facing each other holding hands. Maria spoke softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't need loud promises," she said. "I don't need perfect words. I just need your kindness, your honesty, and your quiet strength. Your silence speaks to me in ways I never understood before." Anton listened with deep emotion in his eyes. He took his whiteboard and wrote carefully, slowly. "You hear me even without sound. You make my silence feel full. I choose you every day." Maria felt tears gather, warm and happy. She stepped closer, resting her forehead gently against his. Anton closed his eyes, holding her hands with careful tenderness. For a long moment they stood like that, their breaths blending into the quiet air. They exchanged simple rings, a sign of commitment, not for the world but for themselves. Anton gently slid the ring onto Maria's finger, and she did the same for him, her hands trembling with emotion. After their vow, they sat on the hill, watching the world wake up below them. Birds flew overhead, the town shimmered in the early light, and the air felt peaceful. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, their renewed bond showed in small things. Maria felt more confident, no longer doubting whether she had made the right choice. Anton seemed more at ease, no longer shrinking from the world's judgment. They built a life not based on what others thought, but on the quiet truth they shared. One evening, they sat on their porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. The sky slowly turned orange, then deep blue. Anton rested his hand on Maria's as they watched the sunset in comfortable silence. Maria leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breath. He lifted her hand softly and traced a slow circle on her palm, a gesture he used to say, "I'm here." She smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I know." The quiet between them was not empty. It was full of understanding, full of love, full of all the things words sometimes fail to express. Anton turned slightly and looked at her with a soft gaze. His eyes spoke in a language only she understood. They told her she was safe. They told her she was valued. They told her she was loved deeply. Maria squeezed his hand, signaling back, "I feel the same." And in that simple exchange, no words, no noise, just two hearts speaking in silence, they found everything they had ever searched for. Their home, once filled with a loneliness that echoed in every room, was now filled with a warm, gentle peace. A peace built not on loud declarations or perfect speeches, but on quiet moments of true connection. As the last light of day faded, Maria felt grateful for every part of their journey. The fear, the uncertainty, the misunderstandings, the healing. Because it had all brought her to this moment beside a man who communicated not with sound, but with soul. In silence, they spoke more clearly than words ever could. And that silent language became the foundation of their life together, a life filled with simple joys, honest emotions, and quiet, lasting love.